Check his bag. He's stealing from us. The words cracked through the summer air like broken glass. Heads turned instantly. Conversations froze mid-sentence. A doorman's gloved hand, raised to greet the next guest, lingered in the air like a statue. Even the pianist inside the Horizon Grand's gleaming lobby faltered, a single sour note drifting through the revolving glass doors before the melody stopped altogether. The accusation had been spoken with surgical precision, clear, sharp, and loud enough for everyone on the marble steps to hear. And it came from none other than Victoria Hale, the Horizon Grand's pristine hotel director. Her red heels clicked against the stone like a judge's gavel as she descended the stairs, every movement calculated, her manicured finger extended toward the man standing quietly at the curb. The accused. He had just stepped out of a yellow cab. His name was David Carter. He stood with a small black carry-on at his side, dressed simply, a crisp white shirt, light chinos, polished leather loafers. No jewelry, no flashy watch, no entourage. To most passers-by, he looked like just another guest arriving for a stay in New York City's most exclusive hotel. But there was something in the way he carried himself. Upright, steady, calm even in the crosshairs of accusation, that made people pause. He didn't flinch. He didn't stammer or protest. His stillness was unsettling, as though he had already lived through this moment 1,000 times before. Victoria's voice rose, carrying across the street. "Sir, this hotel does not tolerate fraud. Hand over your belongings before we call security." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A couple pushing a stroller stopped at the bottom of the steps. A delivery biker slowed, eyes narrowing, pulling out his phone to record. A tourist with shopping bags whispered to her friend, "Did he really steal?" David's gaze lifted, meeting Victoria's without a flicker of fear. His eyes were steady, dark, and unreadable. His voice, when it came, was low but resonant, carrying easily across the charged air. "Finish what you need." The restraint in his words cut sharper than a shout. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain. He gave her the rope, and the crowd felt the tension of it tightening already. A young woman near the curb lifted her phone higher, whispering to her live stream audience, "This doesn't feel right." Others nodded subtly, the line between witness and participant beginning to blur. Victoria's smile curved tight, triumphant. She thrived on this, on control, on spectacle. She tilted her chin upward, making sure every guest, every bystander, every recording phone saw her authority on full display. "You don't look like someone who belongs in a place like this," she said, her voice dripping with judgment. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. Then came the escalation. From the lobby doors rushed a young front desk clerk, Ethan Wong, clutching a clipboard to his chest. His black tie was crooked, his steps uneven with nerves. "Director Hale," he stammered. Should we?" "Check his bag." Victoria snapped, cutting him off. Her words sliced the air clean. Two uniformed security guards stepped forward, their shadows long against the bright marble. They flanked David, boots scraping against the stone. One reached toward the zipper of the carry-on. David didn't move. He didn't raise a hand to stop them. His eyes stayed locked on Victoria, steady as stone. It wasn't defiance. It was something heavier, composure, restraint, the kind of silence that made even the guards hesitate mid-reach. And in that hesitation, the crowd began to murmur louder. A woman with sunglasses muttered, "He just got out of a cab. He hasn't even gone inside yet." A college kid on a bike at the curb whispered to his friend, "This feels wrong." The young woman with the phone, Sophie Delgado, a travel blogger, raised her voice now, her camera angle high. "He just arrived. You can't accuse someone like that." Victoria's eyes narrowed. She whipped around, snapping at Sophie. "Stay out of this. Delete that video before I have our legal team contact you." But Sophie didn't lower her phone. Her hand trembled, but her voice stayed firm. "It's already live." The crowd stirred. Gasps, low chuckles, affirmations. The director's threat had no power here, not on a public sidewalk under dozens of recording phones. Victoria's eyes blazed, but she pressed on, pulling the plastic key card from Ethan's clipboard, the one David had presented at check-in minutes earlier. She held it high like a piece of evidence, her voice sharp as glass. This is fake. We don't tolerate imposters. Gasps again. A chorus this time. A man in a tailored suit, silver-haired, stepped out of a black sedan at the curb. Mr. Grant, a long-time VIP guest, froze, his brow furrowing. He didn't speak. Not yet, but his silence was telling. David finally spoke again, his voice still calm, still deliberate. You've made your decision already, haven't you? Victoria's lips curled into a smirk. Security, escort him off our property. The guard stepped closer, phones tilted higher. And just like that, what had begun as an ordinary arrival transformed into a street corner trial. David Carter stood at the base of the marble steps, his carry-on still by his side, while Victoria Hale's accusation rippled outward like a shockwave. The pianist inside the lobby no longer played. The revolving doors spun slower, guests lingering in half-turns just to watch. A family paused mid-step, children tugging at their parents' arms to see what was happening. Every set of eyes was on him. David didn't move. His silence was not submission. It was pressure, a storm waiting in still air. Victoria took another step down, her red heels striking like gunfire. She raised a key card for all to see. This is worthless. He doesn't have a room. He doesn't belong here. The word belong landed heavy. Gasps broke out. A teenager muttered, "She really said that." A woman whispered to her daughter, "Watch this. This is wrong." And David Carter, calm as ever, bent slowly, deliberately, and picked up the card she tossed at his feet. He slipped it back into his pocket, lifted his phone, and pressed a single button. On the other end, a voice answered instantly. "This is Nia." David's eyes stayed fixed on Victoria's. His voice was low, steady, and cold enough to chill the summer air. "It's happening. Activate protocol." The line crackled. Then Nia's reply rang clear, professional, decisive. "Protocol active, sir. Logging incident. Recording timestamps. Archiving compliance records." The crowd hushed. Even the guards froze. Something in the phrasing, something in precision of it, told them this was no ordinary guest. Victoria scoffed, her laugh brittle. "You think calling a friend will save you?" David's reply was measured, unshaken. "No, but it will save this moment for exactly what it is." Phones zoomed closer. Murmurs rose higher. And for the first time, a faint flicker of unease crossed Victoria Hale's perfectly painted face. If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The marble steps of the Horizon Grand had never been a courtroom before, but on that hot New York afternoon, they became one. David Carter stood motionless at the bottom of the stairs, his carry-on at his side, as Victoria Hale wielded her authority like a weapon. Her words echoed against the glass facade of the hotel, slicing into the murmurs of the growing crowd. "Security, remove him." The command wasn't just an order. It was theater. Her voice projected not only to the guards, but to the audience gathering on the sidewalk. She was building her case in real time, painting David as a fraud, a trespasser, a thief. The guards shifted uneasily, their black shoes squeaking against the pale stone. One reached for the bag again, his fingers brushing the zipper. David didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on Victoria, steady and calm. That stillness pressed against the guards' chests like a weight, and their hands faltered. The crowd murmured louder. "Why don't they just check his ID?" a woman asked. "He already gave them his card." Someone else whispered. "This feels wrong." Phones were everywhere now. Half a dozen red recording lights glowed like quiet alarms. The delivery biker leaned on his handlebars, camera fixed steady. Sophie Delgado's live stream comments scrolled in frantic streams. Profiling. Abuse of power. He just arrived. Why are they treating him like this? Victoria wasn't blind to it, but she doubled down. She thrived on control, on bending the moment to her will. With the key card still clutched in her hand, she raised her voice, sharper this time. This man presented a fake key card. He is not a guest here. He is attempting to defraud us. We will not allow it. Her words rang across the steps, loud enough for even passing cabs to catch fragments of accusation. David didn't flinch. He let the words hang in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating, before replying, his voice lower, calmer, almost too quiet to be real. You've made your judgment already. The crowd hushed to catch it. There was no anger in his tone, no pleading, just inevitability. Victoria smirked triumphant. Exactly. And my judgment is final. She turned to guards, gesturing sharply. Escort him off now. The guards stepped closer, but hesitation flickered in their movements. Phones were everywhere. Witnesses pressed in, and something about the man in front of them, his stillness, his composure, made dragging him off feel less like an order and more like a mistake. The crowd began to tilt. A young mother with a stroller shook her head. He hasn't even gone inside yet. How could he steal anything? The teenager on his bike muttered, "She's profiling him." Straight up. Sophie, phone steady, raise her voice louder. He gave ID. He gave a card. This isn't policy. This is humiliation. Victoria's eyes snapped towards Sophie again. Delete that video now or you'll regret it. Sophie didn't lower her phone. Her hands trembled, but her voice carried. Too late. Thousands are watching already. Gasps rippled. Murmurs rose. The tide of sympathy swelled like a wave pressing against Victoria's polished heels. But she pressed harder, her voice cracking like a whip. This is private property. You have no right to film here. The crowd responded instantly. Laughter. Scoffs. We're on the sidewalk. A man shouted. You can't stop us. For the first time, Victoria's power wavered. Then, unexpectedly, a voice cut through. Deep, steady, measured. Victoria. Enough. All eyes turned to the curb. Mr. Grant, the silver-haired VIP guest, stood with his leather briefcase in hand, his tailored suit gleaming under the sunlight. He had watched silently until now, but his voice carried the weight of decades of loyalty to the Horizon Grand. I've known this hotel for 20 years, he said firmly. I've never seen us treat someone like this. The murmurs erupted louder. Heads nodded. Sophie's live stream audience exploded in comments. Who's Mr. Grant? VIP guest? Even he's against her. Victoria's jaw tightened, her smile straining. With respect, Mr. Grant, you don't know what you're seeing. This man is not who he pretended to be. David finally shifted. Slowly, deliberately, he bent down, picked up the discarded key card from the marble, and slipped it back into his pocket. His movements were unhurried, almost ceremonial. Then he lifted his phone again, pressing one button. The voice on the other end was crisp, immediate. This is Nia. David's eyes never left Victoria's. Log everything. Every word. Every witness. Every phone recording. Nia's reply was professional. Sharp. Logged. Time-stamped. Archived across 3 servers. Protocol engaged. The guards froze mid-step. The crowd went silent. The language, the precision, the authority in exchange. It didn't sound like a guest grasping at straws. It sounded like infrastructure, like systems moving beneath the surface. Phones zoomed closer. Victoria scoffed, louder now, her voice rising in desperation. You think calling some assistant will save you? You're nothing here. Nothing but a fraud. David's reply was calm, each syllable dropping like a stone in water. No, but this will make sure the world knows exactly what you are. Gasped again. The delivery biker muttered. Damn, that hit. The young clerk, Ethan Wong, clutched his clipboard tighter. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He glanced at David, then at the director, conflict warring inside him. He had checked David into the system himself just hours earlier. He knew the reservation was real. He knew this was wrong. His lips parted, then closed again. Fear won, and he stayed silent, for now. But the hesitation was visible. The crowd noticed. And that silence, that failure to defend, landed like betrayal. Victoria saw it too. She spun on Ethan, her voice sharp as glass. Don't you dare undermine me. Do you understand? Ethan flinched, his face pale. He nodded quickly, but his eyes betrayed him. The crowd read it instantly. Fear, not loyalty. And the spectacle deepened. Phones hovered closer. Murmurs grew louder. Witnesses weren't just watching anymore. They were participating. The young mother muttered, She's pushing too far. A businessman at the curb shook his head. This is going to blow up. Victoria pressed on, her voice rising like a hammer. Security! If you don't remove him now, you'll be disciplined. Do you understand me? The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Their hands lingered uselessly near their belts. Phones were everywhere. The crowd was openly hostile now. Removing this calm man by force would be a disaster. And still, David stood motionless, silent, unyielding. His silence was heavier than any outburst. It pressed against Victoria's authority, eroding it inch by inch. The crowd shifted again, sympathy turning into support. He's not saying a word, someone whispered. Because he doesn't have to, another replied. This is going to backfire on her. Victoria's fury cracked through the air. She stepped down another stair until she stood nearly eye to eye with David, her finger jabbed toward his chest. Men like you think they can walk in here, flash a piece of plastic, and pretend they belong. Not today. The words landed like stones in water, rippling, spreading, impossible to take back. Gasps erupted. The teenager on his bike muttered, "She really said that out loud." The young mother whispered, "That's not just wrong. That's profiling." And Sophie, her phone steady, said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "You just proved it. This isn't about theft. This is about prejudice." The murmurs turned into open condemnation. Phones zoomed in. Comments flooded Sophie's live stream. She's done. She's digging her own grave. David finally moved. He lifted his gaze fully, his eyes steady, unblinking. His voice was soft, deliberate, but it carried over the crowd like a bell. "You've humiliated me in front of strangers. You've turned a sidewalk into a trial. But dignity isn't yours to give, and it isn't yours to take." The crowd erupted, gasps, affirmations, scattered applause. The guard stepped back. Ethan's knuckles whitened on his clipboard, and Victoria Hale, for the first time, faltered. Her authority was cracking, and she didn't even realize the real storm hadn't begun yet. The air outside the Horizon Grand was no longer casual, no longer the background noise of cabs and conversations. It was charged, vibrating with tension, as if the marble steps themselves knew something irreversible was about to unfold. David Carter still hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved more than a step, but his silence had grown into a force, steady, immovable, undeniable. And every second it held, Victoria Hale's authority thinned. Her red heels clicked hard against the marble as she closed the distance, her chin lifted high, her eyes flashing fury. "This is your last chance," she snapped. "Open that bag, right here, right now. Show everyone you're not hiding something, or I'll have the police here in minutes." Gasps cut through the crowd. A woman whispered, "Police? For what?" Another muttered, "This is crazy." The guard stiffened at the word. Calling the police was escalation beyond their comfort zone. Their eyes flicked nervously between Victoria and David, waiting for someone to blink. But David didn't blink. Instead, he did something small, something quiet, something that changed everything. He bent down, picked up the discarded key card once more, slipped it neatly into his pocket, and drew out his phone. His fingers pressed one button with calm precision. A voice answered instantly, crisp and professional. "This is Nia." David didn't look away from Victoria as he spoke. His words were low, deliberate, each syllable weighted with quiet gravity. "It's happening. Escalate protocol." The line crackled for a breath before Nia's voice came back sharp as steel. "Understood. Protocol escalation in progress. Incident logged. Transcripts active. Every device recording within range is being mirrored." The words sliced through the murmurs. Phones jerked higher. The crowd's collective inhale was audible. The guards froze mid-breath. Even Victoria faltered, her smile twitching. What nonsense is this?" she demanded, but her voice wavered. David slipped the phone back into his pocket with the same unhurried calm. "Not nonsense. Record." That single word landed like a verdict. The delivery biker muttered, "He's got systems." Sophie Delgado's live stream chat scrolled faster than her eyes could follow. Mirrored? Protocol? This isn't just some guy. Victoria tried to laugh, brittle and forced. You think a phone call scares me? You're bluffing. You're nobody. But the crowd wasn't so sure anymore. Not after hearing the authority in Nia's tone. Not after watching David move with the unhurried precision of someone who wasn't bluffing. Someone who never needed to. And then it happened. The young clerk, Ethan Wong, who had been frozen with fear, finally cracked under pressure. His clipboard trembled in his hands. His lips parted, his voice breaking free like water bursting through a dam. "Director Hale," he stammered, "the reservation is real." The crowd gasped as one. Dozens of heads snapped toward Ethan. Sophie swung her phone toward him, capturing his pale face, his trembling words. Ethan's voice shook, but he pushed on. "This morning, I checked him in myself. Carter, penthouse suite. The system flagged it with executive clearance." The words detonated across the sidewalk. Murmurs surged into exclamations. So she lied. He does belong here. Executive clearance? What does that mean? Victoria spun on Ethan, fury blazing in her eyes. "One more word, and you're finished. Do you hear me? Fired. Effective immediately." But Ethan didn't back down this time. His knees trembled, his knuckles white on the clipboard, but his voice carried louder now. "Then fire me. But I won't lie for you." Gasps. Applause. A few cheers even. Phones tilted closer, recording the exact moment a young employee broke ranks and sided with truth. David didn't move, didn't even look at Ethan. But the faintest flicker crossed his eyes. Not surprise, not gratitude exactly, but recognition. Ethan had shifted the tide. Victoria's face flushed crimson. She snapped her fingers at the guards. "Remove him." Both of them. But the guards still didn't move. Their arms folded. One cleared his throat, eyes on David. The other shifted his weight and shook his head almost imperceptibly. Cameras were everywhere. To act now would be to become villains in a story already escaping their control. And that hesitation was enough. The crowd roared, voices overlapping, indignation rising. "He's the guest. She's lying. You can't just throw him out." Phones streamed live from every angle. A woman near the curb said loudly for her recording, "We're watching a hotel director abuse her power on Fifth Avenue. This is going viral." Victoria's polished mask cracked, just for a moment. Her eyes darted, searching for an ally. But the only faces she saw were judgmental, recording, unforgiving. David finally broke his silence. He lifted his eyes fully, his voice steady, soft, but carrying like thunder through the chaos. "You've humiliated me in public. You've tried to strip me of dignity with nothing but your words. But dignity doesn't belong to you. It never did." The crowd erupted. Some clapped. Others shouted their agreement. Phones shook in hands as people leaned closer, desperate to capture every word. Victoria faltered backward half a step, her lips parted, her breath sharp. She tried to recover, to throw one last stone. "You're a fraud. Men like you always are. I'll have you in handcuffs before the hour is out." Her voice cracked at the edges. And David, calm, unshaken, simply replied, "Then the record will show exactly who tried to put them there." Silence. Thick, crushing. The kind of silence that doesn't weaken but convicts. The crowd froze in awe of it. Phones captured it. Sophie whispered to her camera, "He's not just defending himself. He's flipping the whole thing on her." Victoria opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her authority was slipping like water through clenched fists. The guards took another step back. Ethan straightened, his fear evaporating in the shadow of David's calm. Mr. Grant, the VIP guest, exhaled deeply, his silver hair catching the sun. His voice came quiet but clear, heavy with authority. "Victoria," he said, "you've lost this room." Her head whipped toward him, her voice shrill. "No, he's lying." But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. They had chosen, and they hadn't chosen her. The quiet turn was complete. For the first time, Victoria Hale was no longer the director commanding her staff and her guests. She was the one on trial, cornered on the very steps where she tried to destroy a man. And David Carter, without raising his voice, without lifting a hand, had shifted the balance entirely. The storm wasn't over, but the winds had changed. The sidewalk felt like a stage with no curtains to hide behind. Sunlight flashed off the horizon Grand's glass facade, turning passing taxis into streaks of yellow. Phones hovered in a halo around the marble steps. Red recording dots burned like tiny, unblinking eyes. Victoria Hale saw none of the beauty. She saw only defiance. Enough. Her voice cracked like a whip. Security, remove him now. The guards didn't move. A tremor passed through the crowd, a wave of surprise that made heads tilt and hands tighten on phones. The hesitation was small, but it was everything. On these steps, power had always looked like red heels and a clipped tone. Now it looked like two men in black blazers, refusing to be props. "Ma'am," one guard said carefully, eyes sliding toward the lenses pointed at them. "There are a lot of witnesses." "Witnesses to what?" Victoria snapped. "A trespasser, a liar, a thief, or witnesses to you," Sophie Delgado called, her live stream angle rising. "Thousands are watching. Choose your next sentence carefully." Victoria pivoted, fury whitening her knuckles around a key card. "You're trespassing, too." "We're on the sidewalk," Sophie said, steady. "Your hotel ends at the brass rail." A soft ripple of laughter rolled through the bystanders. It wasn't loud, but it was lethal. The polite giggle strangers give a bully when they stop being afraid. Victoria's face hardened. She descended 2 more steps until her perfume mingled with the hot smell of the street. Up close, rage had sharpened her features too fine. "Open the bag," she hissed at David, "or I will open it for you." He didn't blink. The calm in his eyes did not move, did not crack, did not even cool. It deepened. "Don't," the young mother said, pushing her stroller forward an inch, voice quivering but clear. "You don't put your hands on people. Not here." Victoria reached anyway. Her fingers closed around the carry-on's handle. The zipper teeth glittered. For a second the crowd forgot to breathe. "Take your hand off my property," David said, low, even, absolute. The sentence landed like a bar dropped into place. One guard took an involuntary step back. The other unclasped his hands, palms open now, unsure where to put them. Mr. Grant lifted his chin, silver hair bright in the sun. "Release the bag," he said to Victoria. "Now." She held on, the red lacquer at the edge of one nail chipped to the bare crescent beneath. Something like panic flashed through her eyes. "You have no idea who you're defending," she said, voice thinning. "He's nothing. He—" Ethan Wong moved. It wasn't heroic, not the way movies stage it. He didn't leap or shout. He simply stepped off the last stair, positioning himself at a soft diagonal between David and Victoria. Clipboard to his chest like a shield that was finally good for something. "The reservation is real," he said, voice shaking but carrying. "Carter, penthouse. I saw it this morning. Executive clearance flagged the file." Phones dipped to catch him, then rose again. The crowd's noise sharpened into a clean line. "You're fired," Victoria spat, but even the words sounded brittle now, as if they couldn't bear their own weight. "Then fire me," Ethan said, throat bobbing. "But I won't lie for you." The guard nearest him exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a minute too long. The other rubbed a thumb along the edge of his belt. Small gestures of men, choosing not to be instruments. Victoria's gaze skittered, looking for a wall that would stay still. There was none. The hotel behind her reflected her back to herself in 1,000 panes. The city in front of her watched and remembered. She snatched the key card like a magician grabbing a doomed prop and hurled it to the marble. Plastic hit stone, skittered, spun, stopped at David's shoe. "Worthless," she hissed. David bent, composed as a ritual, and picked it up. He dusted a microscopic fleck from the corner, slipped the card into his pocket. Then he walked, not rushed, not theatrical, up one step, then another. He stopped at the brass rail where private glittered into public and rested his fingers on the bar without crossing it. "Nia," he said, phone to his ear, his eyes never leaving Victoria's. "Protocol. Hard record. Lock external mirrors. Confirm." Confirmed. The voice came, crisp enough to cut. Incident data is redundant on 3 regions, 2 offsite. 37 witness streams mirrored. Facial matches complete. A few people actually gasped. The teenager on his bike swore under his breath. Soft, reverent. He's got the whole internet backing up reality. Victoria's mouth twitched. Tech theatrics, she said, but her voice had lost its blade. Open. The bag. David's look did not change. No. She lunged. Her hand scraped the zipper. The metallic rasp of it sang high and mean in every phone microphone. A dozen voices burst at once. Hey! You can't! Assault! David didn't flinch. He took a single step closer and put his palm lightly, not forcefully, not angrily, against the bag, interposing quiet between her fingers and the zipper. Don't, he said, softened before. Something in that softness made the air tilt. It was not a plea. It was a final warning the world recognized in its bones. Victoria's jaw trembled. She released a handle as if it had burned her. Silence. Summer heat. Taxi brakes, squealing somewhere down the block. In the lobby, the pianist pressed one tentative key and let it fade. Then David did the smallest, most devastating thing he'd done all day. He took the sleek metal card from his wallet. Dolmat, engraved with a mark that wasn't a brand so much as a cipher, and held it between 2 fingers for a single heartbeat where the cameras could see. He turned, past the brass rail, and touched the card to the black glass plate beside the revolving doors. Beep. Green. The lock hissed open. The door slid a degree more generous. Servos purring, as if the building itself were bowing. The sidewalk detonated. Yo. No way. Did you see that? He just... Sophie whirled her phone to the sensor, then back to David's face. Her chat exploded upward, a waterfall of disbelief and vindication and capital letters. Ethan's clipboard sagged to his knees. Mr. Grant's shoulders softened. The exact expression of a man whose suspicions have just found ground. Victoria stared like the city had slipped half an inch and left her foot in the air. You hacked that. David looked at her. Not cruelly, not kindly, as one looks at a storm one has outlasted. No. He remained where he was, one step inside the shadow of the doors, one hand lightly touching the rail. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This hotel belongs to me. It wasn't shouted. The sentence didn't need height. It had depth. The words moved through the crowd like a pressure wave. There was sound, cheers, someone's raw laugh, the high keen of sudden comprehension. But underneath it, the deeper thing, the city's instinct telling every witness that they would remember where they'd been standing when they heard it. Phones lifted higher. A courier did a giddy loop with his bike and nearly toppled. The young mother put her hand over her daughter's ears a second too late, and then laughed, breathless, tears shining. Victoria tried to speak. The syllables fell apart on the way out. You can't say, you don't. Mr. Grant saved her from finishing the sentence. Ms. Hale, he said gently, something bruised but decent in his voice. Step back. She didn't. The shape of her life had always bent to the sharpness of her insistence. She only knew forward. This is a setup, she said to the crowd, to the city, to anyone who might still be willing to believe. Some trick, some con. I have given my career to this hotel. I have protected it, and I will not be humiliated by the owner? Sophie supplied, too sweet. The crowd's laughter wasn't kind, but it wasn't cruel either. It was the laughter people use to shake off the spell of a bad dream. I will not be humiliated, Victoria repeated, but the words had gone tinny. A recording played from a cheap speaker. She was already smaller. A woman on steps, outnumbered by truth. David let the noise crest and ebb. He turned slightly, so the cameras could take him full on, so the city could read his face without distortion. You took my dignity as a prop, he said, tone even. You treated it like something you could use to teach a lesson. You were right about one thing. He paused. The silence leaned in to listen. This is a lesson. A fresh ripple of sound. Applause this time. Not explosive but building. Hands starting at the edges and working inward. Strangers catching each other's rhythm. Somewhere a cabbie blew his horn twice. Celebratory. Victoria's chin lifted a fraction, the last reflex of a body that has only ever advanced. "None of this is official," she said, desperate for a foothold. "Nothing is verified. You can't prove." "Nia," David said, eyes still on Victoria. "Public verification." There was the softest beat from his phone. Then, as if the building itself decided to speak, the lobby's welcome screens bloomed white, then black, then resolved into a simple gold insignia, the same that gleamed on the card between his fingers. Beneath it, Horizon Grand Ownership Consortium, then a line of text in calm typography. Executive access. D. Carter, active. It was visible through the revolving glass, crisp as a confession. Those nearest the door sucked air through their teeth. Sophie angled her camera to catch it. The teenager whispered, "Oh, man, she is so fired." Victoria's face fell open. She didn't cry. It would have been kinder if she had. She stood in the sunlight she had always owned and found that it belonged to someone else. The guard stepped back another pace and looked at the stone. Ethan straightened his tie, just to have something to do with his hands. Mr. Grant closed his eyes and nodded once, as if ticking a box beside the word inevitable. David lifted the card, slid away. For the first time, he looked not at Victoria, not at the crowd, but at the building. The glass shone back a man who had made himself quiet enough to be underestimated and strong enough to end that long habit. He turned to the steps again, to the director who had mistaken volume for power. "Ms. Hale," he said, and the formality was the last courtesy. "Go inside. Wait in your office." She stared, mouth working. "You don't get to?" "Go," he said, not louder, just lower. Final. A hush fell that wasn't fear. It was recognition. The difference between a command and a conclusion. Victoria didn't move. And the crowd, all at once, understood that Act 5 was no longer hypothetical. It was coming with the inevitability of doors sliding open when a key meets the right lock. David stepped forward through the green glow. The marble carried him like it knew his weight. Behind him, the city cheered. In front of him, the lobby screen steadied on his name. And between those two truths, on the thin line of the brass rail, the old shape of power collapsed. The doors of the Horizon Grand whispered open as David Carter stepped fully inside. For a heartbeat, the polished lobby seemed to swallow the chaos of the sidewalk. Marble gleaming, chandeliers glittering, the faint echo of a pianist regaining his poise. But the noise outside pressed through the glass, the thrum of a crowd that had turned into a tribunal. Victoria Hale remained rooted on the steps, her face pale beneath the makeup, her arms stiff at her sides. For years she had commanded this entrance, every guest and employee bending to her presence. Now, under the glare of phones and the weight of witnesses, she looked like a figure propped against a collapsing wall. David stopped halfway between inside and out, his voice carrying through the revolving glass, low and deliberate. "Nia," he said, lifting his phone. "Initiate termination protocol." A hush fell like a sudden curtain. Even the taxis idling at the curb seemed to quiet, engines humming low. "Name," Nia's crisp tone replied, audible to every microphone straining on the steps. David's eyes never left Victoria's. His words were calm, lethal in their restraint. Victoria Hale. Effective immediately. Gasps ripped through the crowd. Sophie Delgado nearly dropped her phone. Her live stream chat exploded in a frenzy of disbelief. He just fired her. Did that just happen? He fired her. On the spot. Ethan's eyes went wide, his clipboard sagging against his chest. Mr. Grant exhaled slowly, the weight of inevitability settling in. The guards glanced at each other with faces drained of color, as though they'd nearly laid hands on their own employer. Victoria's phone buzzed violently in her palm. She glanced down, and the screen glared back in red. Access denied. Credentials revoked. The tiny chime of rejection might as well have been a gunshot. "Oh, my God," someone whispered. "She's locked out," another said. "She's finished," the teenager on his bike muttered, eyes wide. Victoria staggered a half-step backward, her red heels wobbling on the marble. "You can't do this," she rasped. "Not here. Not like this." David's answer was ice over fire. "I already did." The crowd erupted, half in applause, half in stunned disbelief. A few clapped their hands overhead. Someone shouted, "Justice served." Another laughed bitterly. She called the owner a thief. Phones tilted higher, capturing every tremor in Victoria's jaw, every angle of the man she had humiliated only minutes earlier. The story wasn't just being told. It was being broadcast, immortalized in real time. Victoria's hands shook as she fumbled for another defense. This isn't official. None of this. David cut her off with the quiet precision of a blade. Everything is official when the world is watching. The words settled over the crowd like verdicts. Victoria's lips parted again, desperate for air, desperate for footing. But the applause drowned her. The young mother with the stroller clapped softly, tears shining in her eyes. Her daughter clapped too, tiny palms echoing her mother's rhythm. Ethan stepped closer to David, his voice trembling. "Sir, I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner." David looked at him, steady. "You spoke when it mattered." The simple acknowledgement landed heavy, more powerful than praise. Ethan straightened, as if the weight of his silence had been lifted by that single sentence. Mr. Grant, dignified as ever, gave a small bow of his head. "Mr. Carter, I should have recognized you sooner. My apologies." David's gaze softened only slightly. Recognition isn't the point. Respect is. The crowd quieted at that. Even the street seemed to lean closer. Victoria, cornered now in every sense, snapped one last time, her voice shrill and breaking. "You've orchestrated this. You've humiliated me, turned everyone against me." David stepped forward until the space between them was only a breath. His eyes were steel, his tone low but resonant enough to carry beyond the brass rail. "No," he said, "you humiliated yourself. You used prejudice as power. You mistook silence for weakness. And now the silence ends." Phones shook in trembling hands, the weight of the moment almost unbearable. Sophie's voice, whispering into her stream, cracked with awe. "This is history. We are watching a man take back his dignity in real time." The crowd erupted in claps, cheers, affirmations. The teenager yelled into his phone. She called the owner a thief. Others echoed, the owner, until the chant swelled. Victoria tried to speak over them, but her voice was drowned out by the rhythm of justice echoing across the avenue. Her reign was already over, and every second stretched her downfall longer. David raised one hand lightly, not for silence, but for attention. The applause ebbed, the chant softened. All eyes were on him. He looked not at Victoria, but at the crowd, at the rows of strangers who had become witnesses, then jury. His voice carried, measured and steady, the cadence of a closing statement. "You all saw what happened here. You saw how quickly dignity can be stripped with nothing but an accusation. But dignity isn't something you can take from another. It belongs to us, to every one of us." The words resonated, heavy, true. Some in the crowd nodded. Others clutched their phones tighter, already knowing the line would echo across feeds within minutes. David's gaze swept the steps, the strollers, the suits, the sneakers, the streaming phones. They thought my silence meant surrender. But silence is not surrender. Silence is a test. And today, you all saw who failed. The crowd roared. Applause thundered, not polite but fierce, cathartic, rolling like a wave breaking against a hotel's marble. Victoria's face crumpled, rage, disbelief, the sting of a career disintegrating in front of strangers. She tried to shout, but her voice vanished under the ovation. The two guards looked away, ashamed. Ethan raised his chin higher. Mr. Grant clapped once, firmly, as if stamping the judgment with finality. David adjusted the strap of his carry-on and stepped through the revolving doors fully into the lobby. He didn't rush, didn't look back, didn't gloat. His calm was the loudest message of all. The pianist began playing again, softer this time, as though even the music bowed to him. But just before the glass closed behind him, David turned once more to the crowd, his voice slipping through the narrow gap. "No one decides my worth but me." The revolving doors sealed, and he was gone. The applause outside swelled again, echoing off the hotel's facade, spilling into the street like a declaration. Phones captured the final sentence, immortalizing it, already seeding headlines, hashtags, and news alerts. And on the marble steps of the Horizon Grand, Victoria Hale stood alone, not a director, not a gatekeeper, not an authority, but cautionary tale, undone in the span of an afternoon by the man she had underestimated. For David Carter, it hadn't been revenge. It had been justice. And justice, once spoken, could never be taken back. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.